There are a number of beds around the province for people with acquired brain injury syndrome, including Peter's Place, and there is another place, and I don't know if it's in the honourable member's constituency or not, but there is another home that's operated by, I believe, the Brain Injury Association in the Dartmouth area. Mr. Speaker, as I acknowledged in the earlier response, we need to develop a strategy, and a strategy would very much look at rehabilitation services and housing in the community, Mr. Speaker, and that is yet to come.
I would remind members, both questioners and answerers, if you can try to keep your both a little briefer. The honourable member for Dartmouth East.
Well, Mr. Speaker, you know, as the Minister of Finance likes to say, this crowd over here likes to ask us for answers and how you would save money, and here's one where they're spending $15,000 a month instead of spending maybe $1,000 a month, but they say they don't know how to solve the problem. Mr. Speaker, I know the Minister understands the issues. Yet the fact of the matter is this is a problem. There are people suffering now, and all the places the Minister have mentioned do not have beds to support these people, and so we're taking care of them in the hospital. So my question is, you know, Chris Rayfuse is sitting in the gallery today, runs Ranikos. Will the Minister meet with Ms. Rayfuse after question period to discuss this issue with her and report back to the House on a short-term solution to not only Avery's problem, but the problem faced by many of these patients in Nova Scotia?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I would be more than happy to meet with the individual that the honourable member refers to. However, after question period may not be possible. I'm doing estimates here on the floor of the House, and I'll be preparing to do estimates. Thank you very much.
The honourable member for Argyll.
Very much, Mr. Speaker. My question through you is to the Premier. In my previous question, and I think for the answer to the question from member of Clare, you spoke of your $200,000 announcement. The press release seems very concise that you'll be flowing the money to the Yarmouth and Acadian shores, and even the title of it says Province invests $200,000 to market Yarmouth and Acadian shores, and it goes on. The Yarmouth and Acadian shores will be positioned as an exciting gateway and vacation destination within the lucrative Atlantic Canadian market. So, Mr. Speaker, I would say, could the Premier elaborate on this commitment?
The Premier.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to. This is a commitment of $200,000 that is used to promote, as the member noted, Yarmouth and the Acadian shores. It is designed to enhance the reach of the marketing strategy into what is already the primary market for this area of the province.
The honourable member for Argyll on your first supplementary.
Thank you very much. During the meeting that you had first with the town council and then secondly with the representatives of the other municipalities, you told these folks that these dollars were over and above the Ministers of Tourism, Culture and Heritage and ERD $600,000 for Team West. Could the Premier reiterate his commitment here in the House?
The Premier.
No, Mr. Speaker, the honourable member is wrong about that. In fact, I was very clear that it is part of the $600,000 that was given to Team West for the purposes of ensuring that money goes toward matters associated with Southwest Nova Scotia. I was crystal clear.
The honourable member for Argyll on your final supplementary.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And the Premier was not crystal clear. And a matter of fact, probably everybody in that meeting had heard him say something completely different. So, Mr. Speaker, we heard a lot of doublespeak there. We heard a lot of spinning. So I guess that the commitment that he made yesterday only had a taillight warranty, and that once he was clear of the county that it was no longer valid. So why did you intentionally mislead Mayor Mooney and the other councils?
No, Mr. Honourable Member, that is unparliamentary. You cannot say intentionally mislead, and I'll ask you to retract it.
Well, Mr. Speaker, why did he mislead Mayor Mooney and the councils?
The Premier.
Mr. Speaker, it's an astounding thing because I was in that meeting and that member was not. So he doesn't know what it was that I said. What I can assure him was that I was very, very clear in what I said, that this money was coming out of this fund. I also made it clear that we intend to work with Destination Southwest Nova for the purposes of ensuring that the tourism industry in the region is supported. I also made it clear, Mr. Speaker, that it would be that funding announcement would in no way compromise any other application or any other solicitation that they were making of the provincial government for support.
The honourable member for Halifax Clayton Park.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is again for the Minister of Health. Recently, residents seeking care through the Islands Health Clinic are finding that they're able to schedule appointments on days when both a physician and a nurse practitioner are available. Mr. Speaker, I will table the schedule for April for the Islands Health Centre. Maybe I'll give that, Manning, I'll give it to you. Thank you. Very good. That will just to help the minister. While no one is criticizing that the clinic needs to be open and functioning, it's left many to wonder whether this is an efficient use of resources from both a human as well as a cost perspective. My question to the minister is, with an exploding budget and scarce human resources, how can the minister justify having both a physician and a nurse practitioner available on certain days at the Islands Health Centre?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Well, you never know what's going to come up from the opposition, do you? One day you don't have enough providers in an area, and the next day you have too many. Mr. Speaker, after the former nurse practitioner was let go, the District Health Authority for that area, under my direction, was asked to ensure that there was adequate coverage for the people in those communities, that they not be left abandoned, as I was accused of having done many times in this House by members of that side of the floor. Mr. Speaker, we have 3 nurse practitioners providing services there on different days, and we've been able to secure the services of a husband and wife doctor-nurse team, and of course the excellent service from the paramedics on Briar Island continues to be available, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Halifax Clayton Park on your first supplementary.
Thank you very much. And we appreciate the difficulty there, but Mr. Speaker, this looks so much like just trying to keep the people in Digby Neck quiet because of their uproar about losing their nurse practitioner. And Mr. Speaker, twice this week, once next week and another day the week after that, there will be a physician at the clinic when at the same time either the Digby ER or the Soldiers Memorial ER will be closed. We can't find a doctor to work in the ER, but we have a doctor and a nurse working in the clinic. Mr. Speaker, that just doesn't make any sense financially at this point in time. My question to the minister is, does she not agree that it's a waste of money to have a doctor operate a clinic that was really set up and can be run very well by a nurse practitioner?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I want to ask the honourable member, is she seriously asking me to withdraw health care providers from the Digby Long Island area? Is that what she's asking me to do here today?
The honourable member for Halifax Clayton Park on your final supplementary.
The government has been unable to solve the problem of having a full-time nurse practitioner at the Islands Clinic, as they promised in the fall. It's been one of the empty, unfilled positions for months, and I'm seriously suggesting that the minister didn't do the right thing then, and that we are not using the appropriate resources. I'd like to remind the minister of one of her most favourite musings: the necessity of having the right health care provider, providing the right type of supportive care in the right setting. This simply smacks of being the exact opposite. We've heard that this is happening now with the ERs closed while there's a doctor in Digby Neck, and the volume of patients is very low. So my question, Mr. Speaker, because I know you're anxious to hear it, is from a clinical perspective, why is it okay to have both a nurse practitioner and a physician on duty in the clinic when ERs are closed and some patients are unable to access their family physician?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Well, Mr. Speaker, as the honourable member would know, I would imagine, the whole concept of nurse practitioners are to work in teams. Nurse practitioners actually work with doctors in collaboration. And Mr. Speaker, there's nothing untoward about having a nurse practitioner and a doctor working together, just as a nurse and a doctor working together, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Leader of the Progressive Conservative Party.
Mr. Speaker, my question, finally, through you, is to the Minister of Education. On December 23rd, 2009, I wrote to the Minister requesting immediate action to ensure that Holy Angels High School would continue to operate. In a January 29th response, the Minister said, and I quote, "It will receive in a timely manner every consideration possible, recognizing the urgency of the situation," end of quote. Since 2 months have passed, Mr. Speaker, my question to the Minister is this: what action have you taken to ensure that Holy Angels will not close?
The Honourable Minister of Education.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I took the opportunity to visit the school and met with representatives of the staff of the School Advisory Council, the school board, and the sisters who own the property, and had a tour of the building. And I'm awaiting, as I mentioned at that time, I'm awaiting a report from and advice and recommendations from the school board. I understand that they have they're doing a survey and a consultation on the issue, and I believe they're also surveying 7 other schools in terms of possible reviews, and I eagerly await their recommendations. Thank you.
The Honourable Leader of the Progressive Conservative Party on your first supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have to say I'm disappointed, so I'm going to ask my next question to the Minister responsible for status of women. 310 young women presently attend Holy Angels, the only all-girls school in Nova Scotia. Holy Angels, which dates back to 1885, has a tradition of delivering quality education for young women. So my question to the Minister is, in your role as being responsible for women in Nova Scotia, what actions have you taken to ensure the institution remains open?
The Honourable Minister responsible for the status of women.
Well, my action is to support my colleague who's taking the appropriate steps by taking the opportunity to go visit the school and to talk with them because of being a very accessible cabinet minister and is willing to listen to the people when they have a concern. And she's doing the right thing now that it's in the hands of the school board, and she's awaiting the report from them. Thank you.
The Honourable Leader of the Progressive Conservative Party in your final supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll give a third try to the Deputy Premier. Since the Deputy Premier just met with the Cape Breton-Victoria District School Board, I'm sure he recognizes the contribution Holy Angels makes to the education of young women across the province and the value it brings to Cape Breton. So my question to the Deputy Minister is, what steps have you taken to ensure that Holy Angels remains open?
The Honourable Deputy Premier.
Mr. Speaker, I'll leave it to your wise counsel, but the rules of the House says they're going to ask questions that I have a ministerial responsibility for. I do not have a direct ministerial responsibility for that. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Then we'll go on to the Honourable Member for Bedford Birch Cove.
Mr. Speaker, my question is for the Minister of Education. In several media reports this week, Finance Minister Graham Steele has said universities need to spend their money more wisely. Tim O'Neill is currently conducting a review of universities in Nova Scotia. My question to the minister, has your government's finance minister already conducted the review of universities himself?
Just a reminder that, again, Christian names are not to be used. It's the honourable member or the honourable minister you should address your question to. And you've addressed it to whom? The Honourable Minister of Education.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Our government carefully consults so that we understand the implications of the decisions we make, and certainly Mr. O'Neill will be reporting to the Premier. I believe the timeline suggests probably around June, and we will take his recommendations and the information and options that he provides to us very seriously, and after careful review and study, we will be making decisions probably around supporting universities and using public money as effectively as possible to further post-secondary education in this province. Thank you.
The honourable member for Bedford Birch Cove on your first supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In view of the finance minister's comments, does the minister believe that universities in this province are being profligate in their spending?
The Honourable Minister of Education.
I'm sorry, Mr. Speaker. Would you mind having that question repeated, please?
Yes. The honourable member for Bedford Birch Cove repeating her first supplementary.
In view of the finance minister's comments, do you believe that universities in this province are being profligate in their spending? Are they spending unwisely, too much?
The Honourable Minister of Education.
To the contrary, I believe that our government has repeated over and over again that we recognize we have a world-class university system, but certainly because of the financial situation that we've inherited, all sectors of public spending are required to use money more smartly, more strategically, and this study is meant as an attempt to help both government and universities do that. Thank you.
The honourable member for Bedford Birch Cove on your final supplementary.
In view, Mr. Speaker, of the minister's answer where she said that she does not believe that universities are spending unwisely, I'm just wondering, have you spoken to your colleague, the Minister of Finance, about his remarks and asked him not to presuppose what Tim O'Neill is going to say?
The Honourable Minister of Education.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I can only repeat that we have the utmost respect for both our university system and also Dr. O'Neill, and we eagerly wait the information the universities provide and the recommendations and options that Dr. O'Neill will present to us, and we'll certainly take them under careful review. And if there's anything that we can do to make sure that public money is directed to the priorities of both the post-secondary education system and our government, we will do everything possible to encourage that. Thank you.
The honourable member for Kings West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is for the Minister of Natural Resources. Mr. Speaker, the process of booking campsites in parks in Nova Scotia is not without its challenges, especially since we go through a contact centre in Ontario. When the Conservative Party was in power, they signed a contract with this Ontario firm to manage the reservations. My question to the Minister, is this contract still in effect, and when will it end?
The Honourable Minister of Natural Resources.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The contract is still in effect, and I don't have the date on when it ends, but I can get that for the member.
The honourable member for Kings West on your first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, campers have been complaining for years that this system is not working well. The firm from Ontario doesn't handle the reservations correctly. The employees don't know the geography of Nova Scotia well. Campers have been complaining about the level of customer service. Mr. Speaker, my question to the Minister, Why can't we provide this service in Nova Scotia, offer a Nova Scotia solution, and create jobs and economic development?
The Honourable Minister of Natural Resources.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To the member, it's a really reasonable question. The problem is nobody from Nova Scotia bid for the contracts.
The Honourable Member for Kings West and your final
Mr. Speaker,
supplementary.
complaints about fees for changing reservations, bookings are rampant amongst campers. Mr. Speaker, why can't this process be formed in Nova Scotia? Even if the fees for changing reservations are necessary, at least those fees would go back into our economy, fueling jobs and economic development in our province. My question to the Minister, will your department closely examine this practice and try to rectify the concerns of campers?
The Honourable Minister of Natural Resources.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have to inform the member and members of the House that since I've been minister, we have reviewed this practice, and I want the member to be aware that we have about 90,000 people a year who camp in our campgrounds. The number of complaints we get, I think, are in the single digits, but I can confirm that. They are so small in number. It shows that I think Nova Scotians and visitors to the province are very pleased with the ability to reserve campsites and the fees associated.
Okay, the Honourable Member for Hants West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and perhaps that former member's coming down to ask
the Honourable Member for Hants West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question through you is for the Minister of Economic and Rural Development. Mr. Speaker, the company hired to do high-speed internet for Hants County leads people to believe they can get an update on their website. If you go there, it says areas in Hants County in green are fully served. Blue are partially served, and red not served at all, Mr. Speaker. However, 47 communities, or every community listed for Hants County, is in red and defined as not yet served. Mr. Speaker, people in places such as Poplar Grove, McKay Section, and Bramber, to name a few, want to know when they can expect to have high-speed internet. It is the responsibility of this minister to know this information. So, will he ask the company to provide more accurate updates to their website so people waiting can stay informed?
The Honourable Minister of Economic and Rural Development.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and taking in consideration what the honourable member has asked, I certainly will have the conversation with the service providers.
The Honourable Member for Hants West on your first supplementary.
Thank you, Minister, and thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, through you again to the Minister of Economic and Rural Development. I will tell you what an issue it has become. Karen Taylor, a resident of North River Road in Mosierville, Hants County, had the internet company actually call her and tell her high-speed internet was available. She had an appointment for March the 19th. Service individuals arrived and tried for 2 hours only to be told there were too many jitters. She asked what they meant by jitters, and they replied it meant too many things were in the way. They wouldn't be able to hook her up for up to another 18 months until they might have, and I say might have, Mr. Speaker, more powerful towers or longer poles. Has the minister been made aware that some Nova Scotians, because of jitters, might be forced to wait another 18 months or longer for high-speed internet? Because you told me 2 days ago, I believe it was now, it would be by the end of June. Who's correct? The company installing the service saying 18 months, or the minister?
The Honourable Minister of Economic and Rural Development.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and a couple of things. First of all, I'd like to think that I'm always right, and secondly, I never heard the term jitters before, so I can't comment on it. But I would say what I'd like to do, and I sent an invitation to the member opposite that he would, if he would like to join me, I would more than willing to accommodate him along with myself to have a meeting with the people in charge of the broadband at ERD.
The honourable member for Hants West on your final supplementary.
Well, Mr. Speaker, that's an offer that I've been waiting for quite some time, given that we tried to access information through FOIPOP to no avail. We've just been shut down, been asking many questions with regard to Eastlink and the service provider with no answer. So I look forward to that meeting being arranged very soon. Mr. Speaker, through you again to the minister, another individual, and I'm going to give this example, Don Aldis, a resident of Lower Burlington, personally paid $1,000 for high-speed connection through a satellite provider and pays $70 a month to maintain it. However, even this is not enough to run things like video conferences, which he has to travel here to Halifax to do. Don can actually see one of the internet company's new towers from his home office window, but he can't get an answer about when he will get new improved high-speed internet. Will Don get it by the end of June? And do you know what Don's monthly costs will be?
The Honourable Minister of Economic and Rural Development.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I don't want to comment too much on the individual situation without knowing all the details of it, but I would certainly like to take a closer look at this. And again, if the member opposite is willing to provide me with more detail, I will certainly have staff find out what they can and answer the questions appropriately. Thank you.
The honourable member for Preston.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, my question is to the Minister of Tourism, Culture and Heritage. I'm glad to see the Minister has provided emergency funding of $30,000 to Black Cultural Centre. However, this is a stopgap measure that will not help the centre in the long term. My question is, does the Minister believe stopgap measures are appropriate for the centre?
The Honourable Minister of Tourism, Culture and Heritage.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. What I do believe in is consultation, and I'm happy to say that I personally and my staff have been meeting with the Black Cultural Centre on an ongoing basis for the last little while. We will continue to meet with this valuable organization not only to the cultural community of Nova Scotia, but to the entire community of Nova Scotia.
The honourable member for Preston on your first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, the measures being taken by this government do not do enough to ensure the stability of the Black Cultural Centre. The centre is required to reapply for grants every few months, despite its long-term standing reputation. This financial uncertainty is an ongoing concern. My question to the minister is, what are your plans to ensure the centre receives stable funding?
The Honourable Minister of Tourism, Culture and Heritage.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And again, Mr. Speaker, we are in dialogue with the Black Cultural Centre, and I think it's fair to say the Black Cultural Centre has been around for over 25 years. It's a well-established item in the province of Nova Scotia. We are working with. We don't do, when it comes to the Black Cultural Centre or any of those organizations that we work with, we try to do with as opposed to for. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Preston on your final supplementary.
Thank you. There's a great demand for the work the Black Cultural Centre does, but it simply does not have the resources. I know the minister recognizes the value of this centre, and it could be a major attraction for tourism and economic driver in the region. There is no other centre like this anywhere in the country. My question is, what are the minister's long-term plans to ensure that services provided by the Black Cultural Centre are maintained?
The Honourable Minister of Tourism, Culture and Heritage.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And the long-term viability and the long-term plans of the Black Cultural Centre will be determined as we continue to meet with them. And I know that Bill Greenlaw has been part of those meetings. He's in charge of our museums for the province of Nova Scotia. The dialogue, as far as I'm concerned, has been great. The Office of African and Nova Scotian Affairs has been involved, and we will continue to meet with Dr. Oliver as we pursue mutual dreams.
The honourable member for Inverness.
Mr. Speaker, my question for the Minister of Economic Development.
2 weeks, this is actually a very serious matter, Mr. Speaker. 2 weeks ago, I spoke with Andrew Clark with Aditya Birla Minax about the call center in Port Hawkesbury. There were 94 jobs lost there, and we spoke for about an hour on the phone. I was concerned about that. And at the time, there was no mention of further job losses, but I heard this morning that the call center is closing. It's a loss of a lot of jobs in the Strait area. And I would like to ask the Minister of Economic Development if there's anything that he could offer to the members of the House by way of an update on the call centre.
The Honourable Minister of Economic and Rural Development.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I agree with the member opposite. It's a sad day when you have to stand up in the House and ask a question that are related to job losses in the province of Nova Scotia. And for the member opposite, and again, I invite him, if he would like to meet with me later, we can further discuss this because we might run out of time here during question period. But I would also like to say, Mr. Speaker, that what we have is in place, and it happened immediately. We have a transition team in place. The transition team is made up, and they've already had one meeting. They will be meeting again within the next 24 hours. The transition team is made up of not only economic and rural development, it also includes labor and workforce management. It's made up of Service Nova Scotia. It's made up of the local RDA in the area. So there's a lot of the stakeholders are involved, and what we will be doing is working towards what the next steps are going to be, and I will certainly be more than happy to keep you abreast of developments.
The Honourable Member for Inverness on your first supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to thank the Minister for his response, and I can certainly appreciate the need for business in Nova Scotia to make decisions that make sense for their business models. Over the past few months, I've noticed that there's been a number of call centres have consolidated their operations into more urban areas of the province. And while that is good for urban areas, these jobs mean a lot. They have a greater impact in rural areas of the province. And I would like to ask the Minister if his department would consider basing future incentives, which I understand are in the form of payroll tax rebates, to offer those incentives with some advantage for companies willing to locate to rural areas.
The Honourable Minister of Economic and Rural Development.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I respect the question. We have close to 19,000 individuals working in call centres around the province of Nova Scotia. Of those 19,000 people, or close to 19,000, the majority of those call centres are located in rural Nova Scotia. One of the things that you'll find is that certainly in the past 10 months, and it could be even longer, but I'm saying the last 10 months since we've been the government, is I've seen less of call centres. I understand the benefits of the tax rebates and the incentive and their performance base, but certainly what we've been seeing in Nova Scotia, there's been a trend, and I don't want to downplay the role that contact centres have played in Nova Scotia, because I think they played a very valuable role in the province of Nova Scotia. But I think we're getting more and more away, because what I've seen in recent months is I've seen more interest from IT centres, from financial services. So, and again, I would just, if I may, Mr. Speaker, the next time, don't hesitate.
Order, please. The time for oral question period has expired. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, before I call Resolution 1, Mr. Speaker, if the floor would permit me a bit of a preamble on it, and that would be that on Monday, the official opposition's member, when responding to the budget speech, he adjourned debate, and through unanimous consent of the House, we will go back to that debate on this Monday, and we will waive the 15 minutes of each party has going into that. So I would need unanimous consent of the House, I think, to do that, Mr. Speaker.
Is it agreed that on Monday?
Yeah, both parties.
Agreed on Monday that we do that? Agreed? It is agreed.
So, Mr. Speaker, with that, I would like to move Resolution 1 and that the Committee of the Whole House on Supply.
Resolution 1, the Committee on the Whole House on Supply. And as always, we have 15-minute periods for each member. The Government House Leader still has the floor.
Yeah. So, Mr. Speaker, I move now that you do not leave the chair and the House resolve itself in the Committee of the Whole House on Supply.
The estimates are referred to the whole House on Supply. The honourable member for Cape Breton South.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and it's a pleasure for me to rise in my place today to say a few words as we move into debate on supply. And I will start off by making a few remarks, Mr. Speaker, regarding the area of this province that I'm most familiar with and the area that I feel very deeply about, and that's Cape Breton and more particularly the area surrounding the Cape Breton Regional Municipality. Mr. Speaker, that economy in the past 10 or 12 years has been transitioned from an industrial economy to a very painfully slow transition to a more knowledge-based economy and led by a proliferation of call centers in our area over the past decade. And I'll get to that in a moment, but the demise of steel and coal in what was formerly known as Industrial Cape Breton has been very worrisome for the people of that area because of the fact that nothing substantial has been put in place to take the place of the many good-paying jobs that were lost as a result of the demise of those heavy industries. Now, regarding call centers, and I might remind the Minister of Development that the payroll tax rebate system in Nova Scotia to alleviate the unemployment in this province was brought in by the Liberal government of John Savage and Russell McClellan in order to provide an incentive for call centers to locate in Nova Scotia. And the previous government and the current government have both made substantial use of those payroll rebate systems that were put in place by a Liberal government in the 90s. I can tell you that call centers were a welcome addition to our economy in Cape Breton, but they certainly are not going to save the Cape Breton economy. The amount of money that is paid out to call center workers is less than adequate in a lot of cases to sustain families, and in fact it would take two people in any family working full-time to come even close to call center incomes being able to sustain a household in my area, and I'm sure that's the case throughout the province. The other difficulty is that with call centers, that when the technology changes, and it is evolving all the time and it's changing, we never know how long these call centers are going to last, Mr. Speaker. They're going to come and go, and that's a concern. It's a concern to all Nova Scotians, I'm sure, who in some areas depend heavily on call center jobs. So I don't think we can look down the road to a sustained economy, in my area at least, based on call center jobs. They're important, and I would never diminish the importance of those jobs, but certainly there has to be other advances put in place to grow the economy of my area. What would be important in my area is to seriously consider some of the issues that have been sort of on the order paper, if you use the language we use in this House, in my area for some few years now. And they, of course, involve the Donkin Mine project, that it's important that those jobs that are going to come in that industry come sooner than later. And I know there are a number of considerations there, and we haven't had any signal from the government yet that those jobs are going to be coming anytime soon. And that disturbs me a little bit, because I believe that the government should be proactive in ensuring that these industrial jobs return to our area. Also, Mr. Speaker, the whole issue of the Port of Sydney and the need to get on with the dredging of Sydney Harbour, the need to make the Port of Sydney a gateway, the need to create jobs in the future in the transportation industry in my area of the province. And that need, of course, is also going to involve some government, substantial government intervention at some point, both at the federal level, certainly the provincial level, and we have, again, no signal from the provincial level that they're treating the development of the Port of Sydney seriously. And I would hope that that will change and we'll see an early resolve to the questions that the proponents of the Port of Sydney have been asking. Namely, when can we expect some assistance to get on with dredging Sydney Harbour and to get on with establishing the Port of Sydney based in the Sydney Point Edward area for future development of the transportation industry. And along with that, Mr. Speaker, another problem that's still up in the air and no resolve yet from the current government is the situation with the railway. This situation has to be resolved, Mr. Speaker, very soon, because the deadline is coming past. I understand from the Minister of Development that another month has been given for some agreement to be put in place between the railway people and the provincial government regarding a subsidy. That link is a transportation link from Sydney to the mainland. It's a vital link in order to get our goods to market. And if we're going to develop the Port of Sydney, Mr. Speaker, we have to have a transportation system that's available. And right now, the whole question of the railway is still up in the air. And I spoke in this House last week, Mr. Speaker, about the need to do something with the railway, but also the need to look after the people who live alongside the railway that are experiencing some tax problems there. And this government is well aware of what they are. And as a matter of fact, previous letters from the then Leader of the Opposition, now Premier, simply stated that we'll fix that problem. So I hope that the government, through the good offices of the Minister of Transportation, will do just that in the coming weeks. So we can get on with subsidizing that railway. The people down there will be happy with an agreement made with the railway people, and will indeed have a necessary link from Cape Breton to the rest of the world as we develop the Port of Sydney down the road. And also, some of the initiatives that were put in place in the Sydney area in the past that have disappeared are also of grave concern. And I would hope that the government would give consideration to bringing some of those initiatives back. And I speak now, Mr. Speaker, about the film industry that was pretty vibrant there for a while in Cape Breton with an enhanced tax credit system, and with the training that went on with the CBC production Pit Pony, and also the movies that were done in Cape Breton, New Waterford Girl, The Bay Boy, Squantos, CBC ATV productions on Saturday morning live out of Sydney in years gone by. And all of these things have gone because of the lack of political will, I guess, in this province to ensure that the film industry thrives in Cape Breton. So now what we have over in Point Edward is the set of Pit Pony still standing there as a reminder of government's failure to keep the film and television industry alive in Cape Breton. What we have done is we've trained a number of people in that industry. Now they're all going elsewhere for work in the film industry, some of them up here. I would rather see a vibrant film industry in Cape Breton in the future. Hopefully someday this government at least will realize the importance of spreading the film industry around this province in a major way. The other issue, of course, Mr. Speaker, is the whole question of relations between the government and the Cape Breton Regional Municipality. At some point, something has to happen between the relationship between the government and this very large municipality in Nova Scotia. Very substantial municipality which is experiencing some real financial difficulties these days, and the deficit of that municipality this year could hit $130 million, is the figures that I've been given. Now that's something this government at some point is going to have to deal with. You simply can't ignore that. The provincial government can't ignore the fact that this government needs to sit down with the provincial government, and I look at the Minister of Municipal Relations is over there, and I'm sure that her staff are telling her that there has to be negotiations and dialogue with the Cape Breton Regional Municipality to solve some of their financial problems. How much time do I have, Mr. Speaker?
You have about 6 minutes.
6 minutes, okay. Mr. Speaker, it would seem to me at the present time that the major economic developer in Cape Breton in terms of creating jobs has been myself over the past number of years, Mr. Speaker. And I'll tell you why I say that. The elections that I've been involved with in the last 17 years come to this place, there's been some interesting elections held, and I've contributed to my opponents getting meaningful work after the ballots were counted in those particular elections. And I refer, of course, to the 2003 election when the Tory candidate of the day, Scott Boyd, ran against me. We all know who he was. And, well, he didn't do too well, but he got the consolation prize. He went to work in the Cabinet Office in Sydney for a while. Now he's back in broadcasting. Following him, in that election, we had a gentleman by the name of Mike McSween, who I believe works for the NDP now. He tried for the brass rail and ended up working for the Minister of Municipal Relations, and he got the consolation prize too. And then his partner caught the spirit. In the next election, she decided to take on the role of giant killer, I guess, as some people would say. Yeah. And for her efforts, and they were very good efforts, for her efforts, she got rewarded with a job as outreach worker for the NDP in Cape Breton. And then the next election, along came Wayne McKay. He tried to take over in Cape Breton South, and of course he fell short, and he ends up getting the health promotion job in the government. So I mean, those three people have added to the employment roles in Cape Breton, and I consider myself as the person who gave them meaningful employment. Because everybody can't get elected to this place, but at least you can help them to start them in a new career. And then we come to another gentleman who ran for the Tories. He was Scott, I believe his name was. Yes, Scott. He ran in the last election, and he's the outreach worker for the Tories in Cape Breton. Is it Scott? Steve Tobin, pardon me, how soon I forget. Stephen Tobin, yeah, and he's now the outreach worker. So the only employment initiatives that are going on in Cape Breton are the ones that I've been promoting. So I would say to you, Mr. Speaker, that I'm looking forward to future elections when I can contribute to the employment situation in Cape Breton by sending more people to government jobs, particularly on that side of the House. So anyway, Mr. Speaker, I bring that up because, and it's a bit of levity, but you know what, I think that at least there's one thing I know for sure, that the government opposite and the Tory party before that really have taken my advice and said, look, if they can't beat me at the polls, at least give them a job. And that's what they did, and they're all good people, and now they're gainfully employed. I can't say that for the other 15% of the people, and I'm not going to live long enough to get them all a job, but I will say that there is a serious problem in Cape Breton with the employment numbers right now, and something has to be done about that. And I believe that the problem, Mr. Speaker, is so serious in Cape Breton that the Minister of Municipal Relations, the Minister of Economic Development, the Minister of Transportation has to sit down with Destination Cape Breton. They have to sit down with the other players who are trying to promote the Port of Sydney and come up with some strategy that will improve the lives of the people in my area. And Mr. Speaker, I'll end my remarks today, and I'll be back at this before the session is over in a couple of months' time, I guess. But anyway, I want to just for a moment talk about the whole area of tourism. A bill came to the House by the Minister of Economic Development and Tourism just recently regarding the tax situation for the people to grow the economy, to grow the tourism budget in Cape Breton, because the province weren't paying any attention to it. That's the only reason why Destination Cape Breton wanted to have a tax is to take their own destiny in their own hands and promote tourism in Cape Breton, and I congratulate them for that. And I'll be supporting my bill that already cleared this House last year that the minister brings back. It was held up by the previous cabinet in Nova Scotia for whatever reasons, and I would hope that this cabinet sees fit to make sure that that bill is proclaimed on the day it passes this House. Because I'm a firm believer in democracy, Mr. Speaker, and if this House approves a bill, that bill should become law, not sit in the cabinet rooms or at the whim of a cabinet to wait a year before it's proclaimed. If this House, the House of the people, proclaims a bill or passes a bill in this House, that bill should become law, Mr. Speaker. And I can't wait for the debate on that tourism bill in Cape Breton, because I'm going to have the dialogue with the minister, and I'm going to challenge him to put in that bill that at the day that that bill passes third reading in this House, that the cabinet proclaims it as law, and the people of Cape Breton, through Destination Cape Breton, can get on with moving the economy forward in regards to tourism. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, honourable member. I'll now recognize the honourable member for Hants West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and it's an honour to take a few minutes today and bring some comments as we get ready to go into estimates. I want to start, I'll just pick up where the former speaker left off with regards to bills going through the House and not yet being proclaimed. There's one also that's gone through that I put through this House, which is very much tourism related as well, and it was a bill with regards to the birthplace of hockey. So I would remind members on that side of the House that we'd like to see that bill proclaimed and put into place as well. And that's important to the people in the town of Windsor, and specifically in West Hants, Windsor, West Hants, given that hockey is indeed our game, although some may debate that. We know what's right. Mr. Speaker, I never had a chance in the fall, once we came back to the House, to speak a great deal as we went into whatever it is we were doing at that time. But anyway, I want to take just a few minutes and talk about some of the people where I come from, and specifically family and all the work that they do and helping us get here and things like that. And it's a pleasure to be, an honor actually, to be a member in this House, regardless of what side of it you sit on. It's a big deal to go through and campaign and win an election. And in my case, more specifically, Mr. Speaker, win an election when the political tide was changing, to be able to hang on to his seat, and that was a great thing for the folks at Hants. Paula who? Yeah, no, I don't recall how she did, except I heard some talk about a consolation prize a few minutes ago, and I think that was what she got. Perhaps it was a consolation prize. And that's fine. Good on her for once again putting her name on the ballot and getting out there and doing the work that's required to try to get elected as members in this House. And again, it's a great honor. And again, I want to get back to family for just a minute, Mr. Speaker. It's important to recognize those people who support us. My wife, never-ending supporter, works hard. My children, and luckily my children are all take after my wife, both in looks and their attitude, and they're right out there, and they're all good-looking kids. So luckily, as I said, they take after her, Mr. Speaker. But it takes a lot. It takes a lot of people to get here, and we had a great team, and I think it's appropriate to just take those few minutes and talk about that. There's a number of things I do want to talk about. I want to talk about the people, that a lot of volunteers in all our areas, but specifically now, Mr. Speaker, times are a little tougher. We saw the budget the other day, go through and listen to it, and we're going through and taking it piece by piece, and we'll ask many questions over the coming days and weeks, and however long a couple of months. I heard the former member who just spoke perhaps will be here talking about this budget. But it's going to be tough moving forward. Things that we used to be able to put money into perhaps will not be there in the days and the weeks and the months ahead, maybe years ahead. These organizations are out there working, they're raising money, the church groups, the community groups, breakfast dinners and so on, and they're working hard to do that. The Eller's House, for example, phenomenal breakfast there every last Saturday of the month, and they've been at it for a couple of years now and just doing a wonderful job. And thank God they are. I know they've applied for funds, but funds just unfortunately are not available at this time, or so they've been told, to make the renovations that they require and the upkeep of churches. And the same with regards to community halls. There's a number of community halls that are looking for funds, as always, who just don't seem to be able to find those dollars. Hopefully the new budget will allow, once we get into the detail of it, for some of that kind of funding, but they're out there working hard. We're fortunate to have our fire service. We just built a new fire station this past year. It's soon to open, a grand opening in Brooklyn. As a civic center and a new fire station, and proud to say that we made a little announcement there last year, the previous government, of $400,000, which was a great help into that facility, Mr. Speaker. And one of the big things, and I raised it today in this chamber with regards to the question period, was the broadband in this province. Now, there was a commitment that was made, as we all know, for the end of 2009, and the strange part, Mr. Speaker, was that right up until November, through various emails, there were commitments that we were on track for the end of 2009, only to learn a little bit later on that we were nowhere near being on track or on time for the commitment that was previously made. And I think that people can understand that there are issues. Technology is a wonderful thing, but there are issues that go along with that. And when you're talking about rural Nova Scotia, you do have areas where there are things like trees and things in the way, and hills and valleys and so on. Those are all understandable, Mr. Speaker. But the people are frustrated because of what's being told, or should say not being told to them and made available to them. And it was good to hear the minister today perhaps be able to set us up with a meeting, because we have not been able to find out anything. And I hear weekly and sometimes daily, 3-4 days a week, from constituents who are business people, and it's not just the everyday user who wants to get on and search the web and do what recreation type users might do. They want to get on and they want to do business, Mr. Speaker, and they're unable to do that business. And they were promised in years past that they would be able to do business after the end of 2009. And unfortunately, they are just unable to do that. And I can understand and appreciate very much the extra costs that they go through, sometimes going into Windsor from some of the rural areas to go to libraries. And that's just one example in my area, what has to happen. And in some cases, as I spoke to today, Mr. Don Aldous has to drive to Halifax to do a video conference for his business. And I don't disagree with him. It's just unacceptable at this point in time after we've been told that it should happen. And I look forward to that service being put out there. But it's surprising why, I don't understand why we're so long getting bits and pieces here, bits and pieces there of this service put into place. This color scheme of the red and the blue and whatever other, the green, I guess it was, on status of where we are, and us being red and no status of 47 communities and no status at all. Nothing available to any of these folks in Hants County. And the question really is, why is it taking so long with no explanation? So we look forward to getting some explanation, detailed explanation, Mr. Speaker, as to can we meet that June target. And if we can't, I would only ask that we are telling people that we are not able to meet that June expectation, so that they can make other arrangements and they can plan and budget for their travels from Burlington to Halifax if that's the case. It will be quite a disappointment if we're not there by then. We've heard dates from March to May, now in June, as I said, and it's going to be very frustrating if we are not soon linked up with the rest of the world, Mr. Speaker. And we have a lot of businesses, I know, throughout rural Nova Scotia working at home in various capacities with various types of companies. I'm going to leave that. I know I've only got a few minutes, but I want to get on to our health care issues, Mr. Speaker, and we're very fortunate where I come from. Windsor Hants Community Hospital represents a very large base, both in East and West Hants, mostly West Hants, but we have quite a few from East Hants that do also use the facility. And we've been fortunate that we've not experienced any emergency room closures throughout these past few years. Times have been tough, and as most would know in this House, I know a little something, I have a little background in healthcare, and we have been very fortunate not to experience that, although the reason for that, I think mostly, is the fact that we have 3 doctors who have been there for many, many years who will not allow those doors to close, and those doctors are Dr. Catherine Smith, Dr. Bill Enright, and Dr. Marquez Mirsky. And if it weren't for those 3 physicians, I don't know what we would really do in the Hants Community Hospital in Windsor. These 3 folks also offer clinics, and we do have, and I want to be clear, we do have physicians that come from other areas, from Halifax and from the Valley, and do their shifts and rotations at the Emerge. But during last summer, I know there were times some of these doctors were on vacation, and rightly so. They're deserving, as any other hardworking folks, of those vacations. And there were periods where the hospital was threatened to be closed down. But because of others like Catherine and Mark and Bill, the hospital doors remained open. As I said, we service a big area. It's concerning today. I haven't had a chance to go through that report yet. I look forward to the interim report, and Dr. John Ross, who I've known for quite some time and does great work, I'm anxious to read that report. Although he lists 5 hospitals, he doesn't name them from what I've heard from question period earlier today. It will be interesting to see who those 5 are and what does this really represent. There were words used in that, integrated systems by way. You can read a lot into words like that, Mr. Speaker. Integrating generally means we're going to see cuts, things coming together. Does that mean that we're going to close rural ERs that may only see patients at night? This talk has gone on for years. This is not new. But what the biggest thing here, the people and myself, members on this side of the House, Nova Scotians in general, all heard about the promises that were made, not only about not closing emergency rooms, but there were solutions. And I think that the NDP and the minister, I think all good intentions, are learning that the answers maybe that they thought they had, they don't have. Mr. Speaker, that the troubles are not easy to cure at this point in time. Healthcare spending is out of control. It's phenomenal what we are doing with the healthcare system. It cannot continue to grow. And I think that everybody in that side of the House, and I know the minister, and I think generally speaking Nova Scotians know that we have to find a fix before too many more years go by. And it's not only taking up half our provincial budget, it'll be taking up 2/3 or 3/4, and one day it was projected it'll soon take it all. What about our education from there and our community services and things like that? There'll be nothing left if we don't soon get a hold of what it is we're going to do with healthcare. And I hope that Dr. Ross has some solutions, certainly more than what we've seen in this first interim report. But again, all due respect to Dr. Ross, I've not had a chance to go through it in detail. Look forward to doing that in the next few days, because I do have a bit of a passion for the healthcare side of things. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I think that there are an awful lot of things that it's no one partisan that can offer solutions to this issue. I think that there are opportunities for a variety of things. The nurse practitioner, which I spoke about before in this House, Mr. Speaker, is a great asset to Nova Scotia, and I look forward to seeing many, many more of those. I would like to see more paramedics, because they are indeed qualified. P3s are more than qualified to work in emergency rooms. And if there was a bridge training that would need to happen, orientation, or anything like that that would need to happen to require these medics to come in and work in emergency rooms to help offset waiting times for emergencies. We keep talking about waiting times and waiting times and waiting time strategies. None of it reflects the waiting time of sick people waiting in emergency rooms, ambulance stretchers tied up at hospitals for hours on end, and taking the system down is basically what it's doing. And it just keeps repeating itself, Mr. Speaker. And there's no advantage. We need to figure out how are we going to make it better. And I think that there are solutions out there, Mr. Speaker. And it goes right back to the bed situation I've spoke about before in this House as well. We have long-term care patients sitting in places like Unit 500 at Hants Community Hospital or Unit 200 taking up a critical care bed while we await the nursing home. Now, I have said, and I don't mind saying again, I'm totally opposed to the way that we place our patients in nursing homes. The central entry system does not work. The single entry system, in my opinion, is a failure. And I say that based on experience, Mr. Speaker, of having worked for many years in a system whereby a patient would be in the hospital, require a bed, the doctor would pick up the phone and call the administrator at that facility and say, hey there, Ms. Sampson, I have a patient, Mr. Parker, who's going to need a bed in the nursing home, just as an example, Mr. Speaker, just as an example, going to need a bed, and arrangements would be made, and that patient was generally transferred fairly quickly. There was no waits. There was no sending them 100 or 200 or 300 kilometers away somewhere, away from family where they weren't accessible or very difficult to be, accessed by family, and the visitations and so on. And we'll all reach that point, or I hope we will sometime, where maybe we'll, if we have to be there, the system will still be able to accommodate us. And maybe it will and maybe it won't, Mr. Speaker. But we definitely have to start because it's so deep. It goes far. And again, just in closing, I know you indicated I just have a couple minutes left. I want to thank those people that continue to work every day in the healthcare system, the paramedics, the nurse practitioners, the doctors, the nurses, the people that are working in nursing homes, the CCAs and the CNAs and LPNs and whatever the changed acronyms are these days, all very dedicated to the work that they're doing. And I know that I'll have more opportunities as we move through the days and the weeks here to speak again. So with that, Mr. Speaker, thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you, honourable member. Motion carried.
Order, please. The Committee on Supply will now be called to order. The Honourable the Deputy Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I now call resolution for the Department of Health, Resolution E11.
Resolution E11. We will now be debating the estimates for the Department of Health. I'll be calling upon the Minister to make some opening comments if she so wishes, and to introduce her guests to the members of the committee. The Honourable the Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I'm very pleased to be here today to discuss the budget for the Department of Health for 2010-11, and I'd like to introduce two members. My Deputy Minister, Kevin McNamara, who would be known to all of you, I assume, and as well our Chief Financial Officer, Linda Penny. Linda and I were just saying it just seemed like yesterday that we were all here together doing health estimates, and I guess in a way it wasn't that long ago, Mr. Chair, but we're very pleased to be back here today to talk about the Department of Health's expenditures and our plans for this year. Mr. Chair, our vision for today's families is to ensure timely access to quality care, public health care for all Nova Scotian families. That is a goal we share with our partners in the health system, the district health authorities and the IWK, as well as the continuing care sector, through whom we work to deliver health care, treatment, and services to the people of Nova Scotia. The budget for the Department of Health for this year is focused on protecting critical health services in the midst of challenging economic times. Mr. Chair, we have much to be proud about in Nova Scotia. We have a robust and responsive healthcare system. We provide thousands of services to thousands of Nova Scotians every day. Last year, in this province, we performed 100,000 inpatient operations and day surgery procedures. We delivered over 1.2 million diagnostic imaging tests. We served more than 665,000 people visiting in our emergency rooms, or I'm presuming this would be 665,000 visits, not necessarily all different people. Some people may have been there more than once. We performed almost 100,000 ground and air ambulance transports, and we served almost 100,000 calls with our new 811 service. And Mr. Speaker, I want to take a moment to thank the personnel at 811, or we say dial a nurse, because, Mr. Speaker, they provide an excellent service at all times, but they were a very, very important feature of our successful campaign back in the fall with respect to the H1N1 virus and the need to get the right information to people quickly. At the same time, we know that there is much more to be done if we are to keep up with demand and the needs of our population. Mr. Chair, healthcare costs have been allowed to increase faster than our economy is growing. Healthcare spending has doubled in the past decade. Nova Scotia spent $1.8 billion on health care in 2001. Today, our budget is $3.6 billion. This, as our finance minister likes to remind us, is an unsustainable path. And we certainly in the Department of Health understand and recognize that this is the case. This government will bring these costs under control in order to ensure reliable public health care for the years ahead. This government will manage health care spending better to ensure a strong public health care system for the future. Improvement and investment in our health care system is not easy at a time when we must consider many difficult decisions in order to live within our means. However, we are motivated by the knowledge that being more efficient allows us to maximize healthcare investment for frontline healthcare. We will help families stay healthy, get healthy, and manage chronic conditions. And we will do this while still living within our means. We will begin to develop internal audit support for the department and for the district health authorities. This will ensure better monitoring and accountability of our health care dollars. And if my memory serves me correctly, Mr. Chair, I think this is a matter that the Auditor General in the past has had some things to say about and some advice to give. And as you know, Mr. Chair, I sat on the Public Accounts Committee. I chaired the Public Accounts Committee, actually, for a number of years. And I do remember that we had audits of various DHAs from time to time. And so this is a very important function, particularly when you get into a large organization like a district health authority. And you know, I take, for example, the Capital District Health Authority, Mr. Chair. That district health authority serves more than 440,000 Nova Scotians, close to half of the population of the province, really, and has a budget of approximately $770 million on its own, Mr. Speaker. It is quite a significant financial entity in terms of the resources that the expenditure that it has. And so it is very important, I think, that we have internal audit support for DHAs as well as for the department. Mr. Chair, we will also focus on quality and patient safety. A health system that puts quality and patient safety first is better managed, more effective, and more attractive to healthcare providers. Better management and effectiveness is key to helping Nova Scotia to live within its means. Our challenges are no different than those faced by governments around the country and across the world. The difference is that we are going to do something about it. As part of our commitment to patient safety, our quality program will ensure that all existing national and provincial reports on patient safety will be carefully reviewed and acted on as required. Our initial efforts in this area will focus on pathology and diagnostic imaging. We will work to ensure appropriate standards and quality programs to ensure that they are in place and that Nova Scotians are protected. The province is taking steps to improve the safety and quality of care received in hospitals and long-term care with the creation of a provincial infection prevention and control centre. The centre's work includes setting province-wide standards and providing oversight and support to healthcare providers to ensure the best infection prevention and control practices are applied. This centre and its staff have already been an invaluable resource for infection control practitioners during the H1N1 pandemic. Mr. Chair, we will continue to invest in health information systems. We will focus on investments that support improved quality, patient safety, reduced waits, and increased access to care. Health information systems can facilitate patient consultations, deliver test results faster, and support safe and appropriate drug therapy. In particular, this year, we will begin work on a new drug information system, which will allow us to deliver prescription drugs more safely to Nova Scotians by reducing or eliminating the risk of error associated with unclear handwriting or dangerous reactions from multiple prescriptions. Quality and patient safety is a lens through which we will consider all of our work, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, nowhere is quality and patient safety more important than in our emergency rooms. And I am very pleased with the progress Dr. John Ross, our emergency room advisor, has been making in his work. It was a pleasure to table his interim report today in the House. I'm particularly impressed with some of the themes that have come up from his initial work, those being the need for clear provincial emergency room standards to support quality patient care, the need for increased access to primary health care services to provide better care to people with non-urgent medical and chronic care needs, the need to collect and share reliable data on emergency services in order to provide safe, quality care, and the need to address emergency services as a provincial program, or a provincial system rather, so that all Nova Scotians can have equal access to quality care. And Mr. Speaker, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that I was also very pleased that although it was a very short line in Dr. Ross's report, he identified emergency mental health care in his report as a need. And we know that that places a great burden sometimes on our justice facilities, on our emergency health services personnel, on our emergency rooms. And Mr. Speaker, it isn't necessarily an area that we have standards in, and I'm very much looking forward to the kinds of progress we can make for individuals in crisis with a mental health disorder and in need of emergency health care. And we know that we have a long way to go in this regard in Nova Scotia. Mr. Speaker, Dr. Ross's report reflects the candor and professionalism we expected from him when he was selected to lead this work. And I want to again thank him for all his efforts, Mr. Speaker. And I was saying to someone earlier today that the other thing that I really admire about that report, I like so much about this report, is it's an accessible report. You don't have to be a healthcare policy analyst to be able to understand that report. It is written in a very accessible way, and it's so obviously a report that has been done with the care of a member of our healthcare community who is passionate about emergency health services and has not approached this issue as an accountant with a scalpel, but as a competent, highly qualified emergency room physician. And I think this really does reflect the person who Dr. Ross is, and that is what we expected from him, and I'm very pleased to have seen that in his work. Now, Mr. Chair, while we have not yet seen Dr. Ross's final recommendation, we know we will have some significant, he will have findings, and we will have significant work to do to apply his findings. However, Mr. Chair, we are prepared. We have dedicated resources in this budget through the Emergency Department Protection Fund to ensure we will have the needed investment to address this important work. I believe Dr. Ross's work is an important step in providing direction to help address the issue of chronic closures in our rural emergency rooms and long waits in our emergency rooms in and around Halifax. And I wasn't at Dr. Ross's press conference, but I understand at the press conference he indicated that all of our emergency services that he's visited, that they perform a vital role in our communities. We also fulfilled our commitment, Mr. Chair, to ensure ministerial accountability for emergency rooms with the tabling of legislation last fall. Consultation between district health authorities and communities are taking place on chronic closures, and I will table our first annual report this spring detailing dates and reasons for emergency room closures last year. We will follow through with our commitment to relieve stress on overcrowded emergency rooms with the implementation of 13 new acute care beds. We will establish a rapid assessment unit at Capitol Health to help patients move faster through the emergency room to admission so they will receive treatment and get well sooner. We will ensure emergency rooms are kept open by implementing enhanced local funding for physicians where it is needed across the province, but particularly in rural and remote areas. Facilities like the Cobequid Health Centre, very, very important facilities in the ever-growing communities of Middle and Lower Sackville and Hammonds Plains, and I know near and dear to the hearts of my two colleagues from Sackville, Cobequid, and Hammonds Plains, and they talk to me about this centre frequently. Facilities like the Cobequid Health Centre are improving access for a growing suburban population and reducing pressure on the province's largest emergency room. We are in the process of conducting a full review of patient care and patient safety in regards to enhanced services for the emergency room at the Cobequid Community Health Centre. Mr. Chair, HealthLink 811, our 24/7 service to access health advice and information from a registered nurse, is proving to be an important part of this province's emergency care system. This service was critical last year in providing timely information to Nova Scotian families on how to protect themselves from the flu, how to recognize the symptoms of H1N1, and how and when to access care if they were ill. And Mr. Speaker, Mr. Chair, as you know, as Minister of Health, I get many, many pieces of correspondence, both electronically, by email, and through snail mail. They tell me it's roughly 500 a month, and I think during H1N1 it was more like 500 a day. However, one of the emails I received that stands out in my mind was a very short email I've received fairly recently from a young woman who is a young mother with a young daughter. And in many respects, H1N1 is the kind of service that is tailor-made for young families, young parents with children. And she wrote and told me about what a fantastic experience she had had with the 811 service when her daughter was unwell and she didn't know what was wrong and what she should do. And she called 811 and she had a superb, rapid, very professional, very effective response from a very caring healthcare professional, a nurse. And this email was very touching, that she took the time to write me and to tell me what a wonderful service this was and how much she appreciated that she had access to this service. Mr. Chair, the third part of Nova Scotia's emergency care system is our world-class ground and air ambulance system. In November, Nova Scotia successfully launched the first system in Canada to give paramedics instant access to medical alert health records. This means that paramedics can access potentially life-saving information on things like allergies and medications from an ambulance. And Mr. Chair, I was at the launch of this particular service, and it was really very interesting to talk to the paramedics and have them describe to me what this would mean for their ability to respond more effectively in a more timely fashion when they're on their way to somebody's home or workplace where an accident or an incident has occurred, and they're able, prior to arriving at where the patient is that they must treat, where they can actually get access to information about whether that person has a history of diabetes, has a history of allergies, has a response to particular kinds of drugs, and what a difference that makes in terms of their being able to prepare themselves to deal effectively and in a very rapid response to the individual that they've been called to attend to. Mr. Chair, this year we will celebrate the first long service awards for our paramedics, giving us a wonderful opportunity to publicly acknowledge the tremendous skill, dedication, and professionalism of this important group of healthcare providers. And I'm very much looking forward to this particular occasion. It will be, I'm sure, a very moving occasion. And I've had opportunities to attend other award services with our paramedics. We do one in the Red Room annually, where paramedics are recognized by their peers, and a series of awards are handed out. And I was able to attend that last year. It was one of the first official functions that I attended as Minister of Health, and it was a wonderful afternoon. And these women and men are such dedicated and caring and capable professionals. It's always very inspiring to be around them. Mr. Chair, one of the things that our government was very clear about and very committed to in the last election campaign was the importance of improving access and reducing wait times. Nova Scotia, as you know, has some of the longest wait times in the country for some treatments and services. Reducing these wait times is a top priority for this government. Mr. Chair, we know that orthopedic surgeons like hip, or orthopedic surgeries like hip and knee replacements is one area where we are not meeting national benchmarks and where individuals are dealing with extremely long waits, in some cases up to 2 years. We have had discussions with the Capital District Health Authority where the waits are the longest to talk about how best to reduce these waits. We will tackle the waits in other districts with the development of prehab teams. Mr. Chair, these teams, which are already seeing some success in Capital Health, will ensure patients are fit and ready for surgery, or in some cases, will provide other treatments to avoid the need for surgery altogether. And I'm just reminded, Mr. Chair, that I think it was on the day of the official opening of this session that we are currently in, I met a lady who was a guest here at the reception afterwards, and she told me she had been on a wait list for quite a long time and had been sent to one of these prehab teams and was doing exercises with a physiotherapist. And I believe it was an elbow or an arm, shoulder perhaps, surgery that she was waiting for, and she'd been in quite a bit of pain, and that the working with the physiotherapist resulted in her not being in need of surgery any longer. There was so much improvement through physio, and she was able to come off the list. And I hear stories like this quite often, Mr. Chair. There's a lot that we can do to shorten our wait lists, but also to improve the quality of life that people have while they're waiting for their surgery if they're unable to be diverted into other therapies. Mr. Chair, Nova Scotia already has one of the best breast screening programs in Atlantic Canada. And, Mr. Speaker, this year Nova Scotians will benefit from the installation of 5 new digital mammography units, one in Bridgewater, Truro, New Glasgow, Amherst, and Antigonish. Mr. Speaker, I believe when these machines are in place, this will result in a completely integrated screening and diagnostic service for breast screening in Atlantic Canada. We are also proceeding this year with changes to the Pharmacy Act that will allow pharmacists to play an expanded role and will result in Nova Scotians having improved access to care. The amendments will allow pharmacists to administer drugs, including vaccines, to order and interpret certain diagnostic tests, and to adjust a patient's medication without them having to go back to their doctor. All of these improvements will help Nova Scotians access services faster and often closer to home. We know that cancer places a great burden on families, and that families in Nova Scotia face this burden more often than families that live in any other province in Canada. Cancer patients in Nova Scotia will soon receive better care and experience shorter wait times thanks to the expansion of the radiation therapy services in Halifax and Sydney. Nova Scotia has some of the best clinicians in cancer care. Now we also have some of the best treatment options available. Through our investment in new equipment like linear accelerators and expanded bunker facilities, Nova Scotians will benefit from the newest and the best technologies to treat their cancer. Mr. Chair, sometimes specialized treatment is not available in Atlantic Canada. We understand that when patients have to travel out of the province to receive care, that it is stressful for them and their families. And that is why I was pleased to announce our new travel and accommodation assistance policy, which started April 1. Under this new program, we are reducing the financial burden on patients by reimbursing them for some of their expenses related to getting to and living in another province or the United States while they receive medical care that they cannot get here in Nova Scotia. We will make even more improvements to this program in the coming weeks as we seek a partner who will help us deliver this program. Our goal is to eliminate families having to pay for expenses up front before they can be reimbursed. Mr. Speaker, I want to talk briefly about mental health. Mental health is another area in need of significant enhancement. Depression is the second most common cause of disability in the developed world, and it has been largely ignored by previous governments. My government will improve support for individuals with mental illness and for their families. We will continue to work with all districts to reduce waits, and particularly with the IWK to address wait times for children and youth in need of mental health services. This year, we will lay out our course in a mental health strategy, which will provide clear direction for the steps we must take to improve mental health and addiction services for Nova Scotians. This year, community-focused living bungalows are moving ahead. They will provide appropriate, respectful care for individuals coping with mental illness. This fall, we will also host a mental health conference for providers from across Canada. This will give us, or Atlantic Canada rather, this will give us an opportunity to not only network, but to learn from each other with respect to the best practices that we have available right here in our own local region. Mr. Chair, mental health services is a priority for this government. Another pillar of a solid healthcare system is infrastructure. This year, we will enhance efficiency through the creation of a better process to assess and prioritize capital projects, including equipment. We cannot afford to have a cost overrun, such as the one that has occurred with the building of the new Colchester Hospital. Therefore, we will put into place a transparent decision-making process so that all Nova Scotians can understand how these important and expensive projects are implemented. We will also be reviewing the Colchester Hospital situation carefully to ensure we learn from the mistakes of the past so that they are not repeated. In order to provide the modern healthcare services that Nova Scotians need, we will continue to invest in infrastructure, whether that be in the form of equipment, bricks and mortar, or information management systems. This year, we will expand our investment in the electronic health record system for family physician offices. We will also invest in a new drug information system. Both of these investments will support better, safer patient care. I also want to take this opportunity to thank all the district health authorities for their work in implementing the new finance, HR, and materials management system known as HASP. And I think we had an opportunity to talk a bit about technology when we were here in the fall. This project completed the final phase of its rollout less than 1 week ago. HASP will provide a foundation to support province-wide future planning and decisions for the healthcare system. Mr. Chair, I'd be remiss if I didn't speak to the issue of seniors and senior care. And there again, this was a feature of Dr. Ross's report today when he talked about seniors in emergency rooms having to wait great lengthy periods of time to be admitted into a hospital bed. And he raised the question of quality and the way we treat our seniors in the healthcare system. I was so pleased to see this raised as an issue, Mr. Speaker, by someone who knows only too well the realities of what that looks like. Mr. Chair, seniors too are another growing population in need of specialized care and services. This government is committed to giving seniors options to stay in their homes and communities longer. We will support the continued development of new long-term care beds to give seniors more options closer to home when home is no longer an option. We will hire nurse practitioners to work in nursing homes to provide better access to care for seniors and better management of their chronic and other complex conditions. We will launch new management care, self-managed care and personal alert assistance programs to allow individuals and families to better manage their own personal care needs. Mr. Chair, this year we eliminated the unnecessary burden of security deposits charged by nursing homes. Bad debt has not been a problem for nursing homes, so eliminating deposits that range from $900 to $4,700 per client is common sense, and it makes a real difference to these families. And Mr. Speaker, I was speaking with somebody the other day about this very policy, and I was saying I just can't understand how any government would ever have allowed a healthcare facility to put in place a policy that could be a barrier to someone who we have assessed and are very aware are in need of a long-term care bed. Imagine if you were unable to be cared for any longer in your home and your only option was to have admission into a long-term care facility, but you were required to pay anywhere from, $900 up to $4,700. Imagine being denied health care because you could not come up with that kind of money, you or your family. I don't know how we ever allowed that to happen, but nevertheless, Mr. Chair, we don't allow it to happen anymore. And this, I think, is a very significant advance for the seniors in our province. Mr. Chair, we are also taking steps to keep prescriptions affordable for seniors. We know the cost of prescription drugs is often a concern, so we are holding the line on premiums and co-payments this year in the Seniors Pharmacare program. And if memory serves me correctly, Mr. Speaker, I don't think that that area has seen an increase since 2007. So, Mr. Speaker, we've been able to hold the line on that. And we will continue to work with the Group of 9 and other seniors organizations, such as ACE, as we continue our efforts to make life more affordable for seniors and ensure that they have high-quality, accessible health care services. Mr. Speaker, retaining and recruiting the right health care workers, human resources, is a challenge that faces every province and most every country. It is my belief that Nova Scotia has some of the most experienced, skilled, and passionate healthcare professionals anywhere, and I thank them for the work that they do and for choosing to do it here in Nova Scotia. Mr. Chair, health, human resources will continue to be a challenge, particularly when we look at the demographics of retiring baby boomers over the next number of years. And Mr. Speaker, we have, through the years in the department, looked at expanding the numbers of seats in the medical school, in the nursing schools. And Mr. Speaker, we continue to support new medical school seats that had been added a few years ago, and that commitment continues. Mr. Chair, investment in health information technology will support the creation of high-tech jobs in Nova Scotia, jobs that allow our young people to stay and build a life here. Mr. Chair, since 2006, government has created 155 high-tech jobs in the healthcare sector in Nova Scotia. Through continued investment, we can do even better. The most important part of any system is always the people. And at the heart of Nova Scotia's healthcare system are more than 41,000 dedicated men and women who bring skill, experience, and compassion to hundreds of patients every day. This government is committed to ensuring these healthcare workers have the education and support they need to best serve Nova Scotian families. In closing, Mr. Chair, I would like to say that healthcare is one of the services that Nova Scotians value most, and it is a service about which they have the highest expectations. This is an important public trust and one this government takes very seriously. When I reflect back over the last number of months that I have had the privilege to serve the people of Nova Scotia in this capacity as Minister of Health, I sometimes chuckle, Mr. Speaker. I think my first week in the department was the deputy minister who had been there for a number of years, was her last week before retirement. We had to find new leadership in the department. We had an H1N1 crisis looming that the Auditor General indicated that we weren't prepared for. We had no isotopes because of the whole debacle around the Chalk River situation. We had problems in the emergency room departments. We had just about every labor agreement in the healthcare sector had expired or was about to expire. We had an untold number of AFPs, contracts with our specialists that had expired and were yet to be finalized and negotiated. Mr. Chair, I could go on. Every day brings a new challenge in the Department of Health. But I have to say two things. The first thing is I have to say what a privilege it is to be able to work on behalf of the people of Nova Scotia and attempt to address and deal with these many challenges. And I have to, the second thing I want to say is what a privilege it is to work with the staff in the Department of Health who also bring to their work the absolute dedication to doing their utmost to provide the best public health care system and services that they possibly can. And so it's been an incredible opportunity to work with a truly dedicated group of people who have great expertise and professionalism, and it certainly gives me the energy to face the challenges, and there are certainly challenges, but there's a very great reward in doing this work. So with those few comments, I would take my place, and I welcome the questions from members opposite.
Thank you. The honourable member from Halifax, Clayton Park.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I do thank the Minister for her opening comments, which summed up an awful lot of the programs and activities of the Department of Health and sort of set the stage as well for the size and scope of the work that is done by the Department of Health. We all know that this department, it takes up, pretty much the lion's share of our budget. It's the single biggest department, the single biggest expenditure, and is providing services that are so important to all Nova Scotians, to each and every one of us at all stages of our lives. And it is very important to us that we see it well run and that the costs are kept under control. Mr. Speaker, I wanted to just look initially at a number of the things. A few of the points that I had right off the bat are items that the Minister has touched on in her opening comments, so I thought we could go to some of those just right now. We will have many hours here with the Minister, and she knows that, and so does my colleague from the Conservative Party. We always have health as one of the major departments to come before this Estimates Committee, because we know there's so much to look at and examine, and And as the minister knows, I much prefer the kind of dialogue and discussion we have here to the sort of discussion that we may have the opportunity to have in short exchanges in the legislature, which I don't think are nearly as productive as what we do in estimates, is really what I'm saying. And so I always appreciate the opportunity to look at subjects that I know that we both, share an interest in and want to see the success of here in our province. We actually want to see something delivered in communities that is going to make a difference to the lives of Nova Scotians. And otherwise, we would not even be here in the first place because there would be no point. We are here to see if we can't find ways to redirect the resources that are at hand. I do worry, of course, that we're at a time that's very different from my arrival here in the legislature in 2003, because in 2003 till about 2008, we had expanding revenue sources, and times were actually better. I would not say that provisions were made during that time for the rainy day, which has come. And we knew as of the recession arriving that our revenues would drop precipitously, as they did, primarily from our offshore resources, but also because people were purchasing less and we were exporting less because of our international markets being affected. So, that's come home to roost. And all of the increases in spending, which are for good and worthwhile programs, I would say, in the health department, by and large, I think we can say, we can't sustain it. And the minister's right in saying that we can't sustain the growth. But we do have to think smarter then. We have to think of new ways to get to the same outcome, to try and provide those services in new ways, that maybe using other medical professionals, making the best use of the people that we have available, and so on. I note that the minister talked about the pharmacists and the changes that are coming in that profession. And I know we will have an opportunity to discuss the new bill that's before us about changing the scope of pharmacists. But it is something that I think is a ray of hope, really, that we can look at not only pharmacists but other medical professionals. But we can start with the pharmacists because they're highly trained, very smart in what they do, and can really provide a lot of value. And we haven't used them to their full potential. And I think it's rather interesting that I have a son who's studying chemistry right now who has an opinion of pharmacy that it's very narrow, that they count pills and that's all they do is dispense drugs. And I've been saying to him what a great profession it would be for him to look at. And, I'm hoping he'll review that again in light of the fact that there are a lot more ways that pharmacists can play a role in the healthcare system. And I think that it does really present an opportunity and really a whole new vista for people who want to look at that as a profession. So I'm hoping that not only perhaps my son, but many other young people will see this, and that we'll have an expansion in the number of people. Now, Mr. Speaker, I know that I have an hour to begin with the minister, so I just wanted to go to a couple of clarifications, because we didn't get copies, of course, of her opening statement, and I didn't get all the figures down. I wondered if the minister, just by way of clarification, could give the figure again about where we were. You had said how much the budgets had increased over something like 2001 or 2, I think you started with, to today. And I would really like to be able to just put that down in context to the spending that we are here to discuss, because although there are a lot of really interesting programs and initiatives and ideas that we'll talk about here, our main purpose is to examine the budget and the numbers that are presented to us. So I wonder if you could do that by way of comparison. Thank you.
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And yes, the figures I used was that Nova Scotia spent $1.8 billion on health care in 2001, and today our budget is $3.6 billion. And actually, I think when I arrived in this legislature in 1998, if memory serves me right, I can't believe I still have this number in my head, but I think the health care budget at that time was $1.4 billion in 1998.
Thank you. The Honourable Member from Halifax Clayton Park.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Chair, I'll through the chair. I won't forget you. That certainly is an astounding difference, though. I mean, really, the figure you gave us is the point at which it doubled. Really, in 10 years, it's a complete doubling of the budget. And I think that helps to set the context as we go through. I will say, Mr. Chair, as you look at what we received when the budget was introduced, there's a great stack of books and supplementary books and every other book. But when I came down to just the health section, it's pretty light. And I I have taken out just the pages relating to the Department of Health, and I think there are 16, 16 pages. And so it leaves a lot of questions to us in opposition, and I'm sure even to the members of on the government side, if you're not in the Health Department, if you're not the Minister of Health. Those figures are, and I would know this just having been in, maybe not an accountant, but I am a CMA. I've studied accounting. The figures are rolled up to a really high level. Everything is consolidated and rolled together. And a great deal of the spending will be a one line item for a DHA, for example, where you have all of the frontline health delivery rolled into a single figure for that entire part of the province. And I've now been the health critic for almost a year, 3/4 of a year, but I still find the department is pretty confusing, the way there is sort of a division of duties between DHAs and what's done at the Department of Health itself. And, I see other members nodding. It really is a complex department. There's, I think, a lot of confusion. And then we have health promotion and protection, which we'll deal with at another soon, as we go along here concurrently, I suppose. But that, again, is another one. And I know the other day in a question, I didn't differentiate between the Department of Health Promotion and Protection and health itself. And they are really two different departments. And so we have to always keep in mind that you have two separate budgets you're administering. And even though they seem like a great overlap, there are different responsibilities. So it does become a bit confusing, and I'm sorry that we can't get more of the depth, but I'm going to try and drill down into some of the individual figures that we have in here. So to begin with, there's a few items that are almost carryovers from last year to an extent, and I wanted to follow up on where they are. One of them would be the support for the medical students, and the minister will know, Mr. Chair, that was something that we had promoted in the Liberal Party. We had noted very quickly that with New Brunswick setting up their own medical school in their own province, they had previously paid for 20 seats at Dalhousie's medical school, and that they were reserved for New Brunswick students. And with them setting up their own, it's sort of a satellite really, because Dalhousie will still be the school administering it, but they will be studying in New Brunswick. It has freed up a capacity at our medical school at Dalhousie. And we had previously in the budget, it's on page 13.7 for anybody who's following along and anybody that wants to see where we're at. 13.7 has a line item about the support for that program. I believe it is anyway. And again, I know you have your financial staff with you today too that can help.